Something strange is going on. Something fishy is happening in the way modern Stoicism is taught today. There is a massive hole in what you are being fed about this philosophy, and today we're going to get to the bottom of it. This void is especially troublesome for my first responders, for my military folks out there, and really anyone who's living a stressful, high-stakes life and trying to practice Stoicism for practical everyday reasons. This isn't for the people who are just studying philosophy to sound smart at dinner parties. This is for the people who need a hard philosophy because they're living a hard life. Let me explain the problem here and uncover the mystery of this missing Stoic knowledge. This is a case of a missing person. And in this case, we are suspiciously missing a Stoic master instructor. When you pick up modern books or scroll through social media, you hear the same three names repeated over and over again. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. Now, don't get me wrong, they deserve their place. They are all beyond wise, and I know we all get a massive amount out of their teachings. I know I definitely have. Then there's some other Stoics you might have stumbled across, guys like Zeno or Cato, a man who absolutely cannot be ignored. But something big is missing, especially in terms of the specific roles these various Stoics fill and how they're actually useful to you in the real world. So let me break it down for you real quick, and maybe you'll understand what I'm talking about. First, we have Zeno, and he gets credit for starting the entire philosophy of Stoic. He has a handful of brilliant teachings that I've read, maybe you've read them too, but mainly his life story just bridges the gap. It's a critical gap, taking us from cynicism to the far superior path of Stoicism. Those of us under constant stress and hardship need his examples so we don't get bogged down in cynicism. And so we understand that the path forward, the path to excellence, is the Stoic path. Cato, his role is to be the living standard. He's the ultimate role model, the ideal Stoic. He shows us what perfection actually looks like in action. Then we have Seneca. Seneca gives us brilliant writing. He's a thinker, an absolute master of theory. Seneca unravels complicated ideas and breaks down deep concepts. He lays it all out for us, helping us to understand human weakness, human folly, and the human mind. Marcus Aurelius, he gives you deep introspection. He compiles the entire practice of Stoicism into his personal thoughts on building an invincible character. And he certainly demonstrated that character under brutal circumstances. He's the beloved coach who lets you inside his own head, showing you exactly how he's thinking through his struggles. And then, of course, there's Epictetus. He's our great teacher. He gives you a system, a framework for thinking, for processing the chaos of the world around you. He essentially hands us a PhD on how to live a good life, how to live a resilient life. So, look at what we have. We have a great Stoic for almost every need. We have role models, innovators, intellectuals, coaches, and teachers. We have someone for almost every learning style, with one glaring exception. Look around. As a Marine, as a law enforcement guy, as somebody who's actively trying to deploy this philosophy on a daily basis under real-world stress, for me, the missing type of teacher is the instructor. Where is the hard-nosed drill instructor who doesn't take any crap? Where is the instructor who doesn't want to hear your excuses and makes damn sure you're actually practicing the skill and not just memorizing book knowledge? Where's our personal trainer who stands over us, makes us put in the reps, and forces us to get actual results? Where's our martial arts master who will whip us into shape, get us ready for the fight? This is exactly what I wanted to know when I started looking into this massive gap in Stoicism. Where is this missing person? It seems like they would be there. It seems like Stoicism would lend towards this type of character. Well, I found him for you. And I investigated the source of his disappearance from popular Stoicism. If you aren't familiar, let me introduce you to the man. His name is Musonius Rufus, and his take on Stoicism might be the exact thing you need to make the all-important leap from intellectual theory to useful everyday practice. Musonius Rufus isn't like some other Stoic teachers and writers. He's a little more hardcore than that. Musonius Rufus demands proof. He treated philosophy like physical conditioning. training for the exact moment when comfort disappears and character is all you have left. That may be why he's been neglected by popular culture. That may be a major clue as to why he went missing. But it's also why he might be the exact Stoic that we need the most right now. Think about it like this. One of the most respected, legendary Stoic teachers in the entire Roman world has been pushed so far into the background that many modern practitioners have barely even heard his name. And his absence should raise a massive red flag. Let me tell you about him, and while you listen, I want you to ask yourself this question. How on earth is a guy like this relatively unknown and been completely ignored? Because I assure you, it doesn't make any sense at all. And by the way, if you hang in there, I have the real answer for you at the end of this video. Let's consider Musonius Rufus's record. He was the primary teacher of Epictetus. He is essentially the Master Yoda of Stoicism. He argued very hard that women possessed the exact same capacity for reason and virtue as men, in a time when nobody was trying to hear that. He was an early figure in women's liberation and women's rights. He was exiled to a barren, desolate rock of an island and just kept right on teaching. He started a school on a deserted island, and people actually came. He literally walked into the middle of a bloody Roman civil war, stood between two armed armies, and lectured battle-hardened soldiers on the value of peace, trying to stop the fighting. His philosophy was direct, demanding, and built explicitly for difficult lives. Yet mainstream books about Stoicism often give him only a few throwaway sentences and reduce him to merely the teacher of Epictetus, or they leave him out of the conversation completely. How does someone that important become just a historical footnote? So let's go directly to the source. I want to break down his core philosophy through a collection of his most powerful teachings and see what this missing Stoic can teach us about living a hard life with an unshakable mind. Now, let's step into the gym. Let's look at the actual field manual that Rufus left us. When you read through his fragments, you immediately notice something different. He isn't giving you abstract theories about the cosmos or navel-gazing logic puzzles. He's giving you tactical principles. Here are the foundational lessons of Musonius Rufus and why they are designed specifically for people who have to operate under pressure. Here's the first quote from him. If you accomplish something good with hard work, the labor passes quickly, but the good endures. Pleasure gained shamefully passes, while the shame remains. Let me break that down for you. Think about the last time you completed a brutal shift, an exhausting workout, or a nightmare project at work. In the middle of it, your muscles burned, your brain was fried, and every cell in your body wanted to quit. But where is all that physical fatigue today? It's gone. It evaporated within 24 hours. What remains is the fact that you held the line. You did the job, and you built a piece of character that nobody can take away from you. Now, let's flip the coin. Think about a time someone took the dirty shortcut. They cut a corner, they lied to dodge accountability, or gave in to a cheap impulse decision. The momentary relief or pleasure lasted, 5 minutes? But the damage, the hit to their integrity, the loss of trust, the nagging rot of self-disgust, that sticks around for years. Rufus is pointing out a fundamental law of human mechanics. Pain is temporary, but the consequences are permanent. When you're facing a choice between doing what's right and doing what's easy, remember that the discomfort of hard work expires immediately. The shame of a cheap compromise stays on your tab forever. Let's look at another one of his sayings. He said, "We begin to lose our hesitation to do immoral things when we lose our hesitation to speak of them." How does that work? Culture doesn't collapse overnight, and neither does personal character. It rots from the edges inward, and it almost always starts with how we talk. Rufus understood human psychology long before modern behavioral science caught up. When you start casually talking about cutting corners, when you joke about unethical behavior, or when you normalize bad habits in your daily conversations, you are lowering your psychological guard. You are desensitizing your nervous system. If you speak like a cynic, you will eventually act like a cynic. If you normalize laziness or corruption with your mouth, your actions will inevitably follow. Rufus demands that you guard your speech with the same vigilance that you guard a perimeter. Rufus demands that you guard your speech with the same vigilance that you would guard your own home, because the words you allow out of your mouth set the boundaries for what you will eventually allow in your life. Let's look at another one of his fragments. Here's something Rufus said. You will deserve respect from everyone if you will start by respecting yourself. What does he mean by that? Where's his philosophy going with this? What he's saying is, in high-stress environments, people often obsess over whether they are getting the respect they deserve from their bosses, from their peers, or the public. But Rufus flips the entire dynamic on its head. Respect isn't something you demand from others. It's something you command by how you handle yourself when nobody is watching. Self-respect isn't about pride or vanity. It's about keeping the promises you make to yourself. It's about maintaining your standards when you're tired, keeping your environment organized, holding your temper, and refusing to compromise your values when it would be easy to get away with it. If you treat yourself like an undisciplined wreck, if you constantly break your own rules and make excuses, why should anybody else take you seriously? True authority and respect are simply the outward overflow of inward self-discipline. Do you see where Musonius Rufus is going? Let's look at another fragment from him. The human being is born with an inclination towards virtue, but the person who wants to become good must not merely learn about virtue, but train himself to practice it eagerly and rigorously. He also said training must involve both the soul and the body. So what does he mean by that? This is where Rufus completely separates himself from the ivory tower philosophers. He acknowledges that we all have the capacity for decency, courage, and self-control, but capacity without conditioning is completely useless when the pressure turns up. Think about tactical shooting, martial arts, high-level athletics. You can read 20 books on how to shoot a pistol under stress. You can memorize the biomechanics, study the trajectory charts, and write an essay on recoil management. But if you haven't put in thousands of physical reps on the range until your hands build muscle memory, you will choke when the real threat appears and your adrenaline spikes. Philosophy is no different. You can't read your way into courage. You can't intellectualize your way out of a panic attack. Rufus insists that virtue is a physical discipline. It requires daily, rigorous reps. Facing minor discomforts, controlling your breathing, suppressing petty outbursts, and training your body and mind together so that when chaos erupts, your default response is discipline and not panic. But that's not all he said. Remember, we're talking about somebody who was basically a footnote in Stoic history. Let me give you another one. He said hardship is unavoidable. So it makes little sense that people pursuing worthy goals should be less willing to endure it than people pursuing worthless ones. Here's what he's saying about this. Look around at modern society and you'll see something insane. People will endure absolute agony for completely trivial things. They will starve themselves on extreme fad diets just to look good in a selfie. They will wake up at 4 a.m. and push themselves to the brink of physical collapse to beat an arbitrary time on a fitness app. They will work 80-hour weeks and destroy their health just to buy a car they can't afford to impress people that they don't even like. They are willing to suffer, but they are suffering for garbage. Rufus looks at this human tendency and calls it out. He gets in your face about it. If you are already willing to endure pain, exhaustion, and sacrifice for meaningless vanity, why on earth do you whine when life demands hardship for something that actually matters? When life demands that you stay up all night to take care of a family crisis, or hold your composure through a brutal work shift, or to stand up for a principle that cost you financially, embrace that hardship. You're going to suffer in this life either way. Make sure you are paying that tax for something that is worth it. Here's another thing that Rufus said. How can someone become courageous merely by learning that frightening things shouldn't be feared if he has never practiced facing them? He also said, we should practice choosing hardship when doing so trains us towards virtue. In modern high-stress occupations, we call this stress inoculation. You don't train a firefighter by showing them a slideshow of a burning house. You put them in a smoke-filled flashover chamber and let them feel the heat so their brain learns not to panic. Rufus was teaching stress inoculation 2,000 years ago. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the management of your psychological response to fear. And you cannot manage that response if you live a life of total comfort. If you never expose yourself to the cold, to exhaustion, to awkward social confrontations, or to physical strain, then the moment life throws a genuine crisis at you, your nervous system will hijack your brain. Rufus tells us to intentionally choose voluntary hardship. Take the cold shower. Do the hardest physical workout. Step into the uncomfortable conversation, specifically in order to keep your edge sharp. You train under controlled hardship so that uncontrolled hardship can't break you. Again, this is the man that has been ignored for so long that nobody's talking about, nobody's posting quotes about. Yet he has more to say. He said this, luxury makes us softer towards hardship, while simplicity prepares us to endure it. What's he mean? Comfort is a slow, silent poison. It sneaks up on you. When everything in your life is soft, when the temperature is always perfectly regulated, the food is always instantly delivered, and every minor inconvenience is shielded by a modern technology, your threshold for enduring pain shrinks to almost zero. Suddenly, a delayed flight, a broken air conditioner, or a difficult coworker feels like an existential crisis. Rufus isn't saying you have to live in a cave and eat dirt. What he's saying is he's warning you against letting luxury become your baseline. If you become dependent on comfort, you become vulnerable. Anyone who controls your comfort controls you. By keeping your lifestyle lean, simple, and tough, you retain your freedom. You stay mobile, adaptable, and hard to kill, both physically and mentally. Here's something else Rufus said. Exile cannot prevent you from learning or practicing what is necessary for virtue. Remember who's saying this. Rufus. He wasn't writing from a cozy villa in the Italian countryside. He was banished by the Emperor Nero to Gyros, a tiny, desolate rock of an island in the Aegean Sea with almost no water, no vegetation, and no amenities at all. A lesser man would have spent his days wallowing in self-pity, complaining about how unfair the political system was, and waiting for his circumstances to change. Rufus looked around at the dirt and the rocks, and he said this, my character is still in my hands. He gathered people on that island, and he kept right on teaching, no matter what the circumstance. This destroys every excuse we like to make. My boss is toxic. My shift schedule is ruining my life. The economy is terrible. My environment is trash. Rufus cuts right through all of it. Your circumstances do not hold a vote on your integrity. You can practice honor, patience, discipline, and grit anywhere, even on a barren rock in the middle of nowhere. If your philosophy only works when conditions are perfect, you don't have a philosophy. You have a fragile hobby. Here's something else Musonius Rufus talked about. He said a philosopher shouldn't respond to insult as though he has suffered genuine harm. Think about it like this. In the age of social media, outrage culture, and constant petty squabbling, this lesson hits like a freight train. When someone hurls an insult at you, what have they actually done? Really, they've just vibrated the air, its molecules around you that create a specific sound wave, or they've typed characters on a lit up screen. That's it. That's all they've actually done. The only way that sound wave or text becomes harmful is if you process it that way in your brain, if you take offense to it, if you hand over control of your emotional state to whatever idiot dished it out. Rufus argues that a disciplined mind views insults as completely irrelevant. Responding with anger or outrage is an admission that the insult hit a nerve, that the person who threw it has power over you. A true professional doesn't lose their composure over cheap talk. You let it bounce off your armor and keep moving towards the objective. Here's one more thing Musonius Rufus said. This is for ladies out there especially. Over 2,000 years ago, he said this: both men and women possess the same capacity for virtue, and therefore both should receive philosophical training. In the ancient Roman world, this was a radical, almost dangerous statement. But Rufus didn't care about the social norms. He cared about the objective truth. His argument was brutally logical. Both men and women face hardship. Both face grief. Both face moral choices, and both possess the capacity for reason. Therefore, both need the same exact armor. For us today, the takeaway goes even deeper. The standard of virtue applies to everyone, everywhere, without exception. There are no special passes, no demographic exemptions, and no excuses based on background. Everyone is in the arena. Everyone faces the storm. And everyone has a duty to build a mind capable of weathering it. One more thing. One more little note from this person who seemingly doesn't matter to the world of philosophy, these historians or these intellectuals. Here's one more thing he said. The philosopher should demonstrate his philosophy through how he lives, rather than merely through what he can argue. This is the pinnacle of Musonius Rufus' entire framework. He did not care if you could win a debate. He did not care if you had memorized the Stoic text. He doesn't care if you could recite them word for word. He didn't care if you looked smart in front of an audience. He wanted to see the proof in your life. How do you treat your spouse after a 14-hour shift when you're totally exhausted? How do you handle a crisis at work when everyone else is losing their minds? How do you treat people who can do absolutely nothing for you? How do you handle pain, loss, or defeat? Your life is your actual philosophy. Everything else is just noise. So, I've run you through the entire case. I've explained to you who this person was, what he stood for, all the different ways he contributed to this philosophy, this extraordinary life he led. So let's solve the mystery once and for all. How does the man who taught Epictetus, stood in between two clashing Roman armies, survived brutal exiles, and laid out the most practical field guide for human resilience in the ancient world, get reduced to being just a footnote? It wasn't an accident, and it wasn't a matter of lost manuscripts. Musonius Rufus was systematically sidelined by history because he makes armchair intellectuals, comfortable academics, and theory-only philosophers deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. I want you to think about how traditional academia works. Comfortable historians and library philosophers love thinkers who give them endless layers of abstraction to debate. They love Seneca's brilliant, complex metaphors because they can spend 4 years writing a PhD thesis on a single letter without ever having to step outside their climate-controlled office. They love debating logic, analyzing terminology, and posturing in panel discussions to look smart for their peers. Musonius Rufus completely ruins that party. Rufus doesn't give you complex intellectual knots to untangle over an espresso. He grabs you by the collar, looks you dead in the eye, and asks a question that terrifies every armchair philosopher who ever lived. I see you can talk about virtue for 2 hours, but how did you act when somebody insulted you this morning? Did you lose your temper? Did you fold under stress? Did you take the easy way out? Rufus takes away the academic's favorite hiding spot, confusing knowing with doing. He exposes the fraud of treating a warrior's philosophy like a book club hobby. He makes it crystal clear that if your knowledge doesn't turn to real-world conduct under pressure, you haven't learned anything at all. You're just playing make-believe. You're cosplaying a philosopher. And because he held up that brutal, unforgiving mirror, the ivory tower took the easy exit, like they always do. They quietly pushed him into a dark corner of history, and they left him there. Here's the truth. We don't need academic gatekeepers. We don't need them to dictate who we learn from, who we study, or whose advice we take. They can keep their comfortable seminars and their endless, lofty debates about abstract logic. That isn't built for us. That isn't built for the person working the midnight shift, the leader carrying the weight of their team on their shoulders, the parent trying to stay composed in a chaotic home, or the first responder walking into a house on the worst day of someone's life. We don't need a philosophy for the library. We need a philosophy for the battleground. It's time to bring Musonius Rufus out of the margins and put him back where he belongs, at the front of the formation. So here's my call to arms for you today. Stop letting modern culture turn Stoicism into a collection of motivational quotes for your phone screen. Stop reading 10 different books on virtue while your daily habits remain soft, undisciplined, and reactive. Take up the standard Rufus laid down over 2,000 years ago. Treat your character like physical conditioning. Put in the daily, unglamorous reps. Voluntarily seek out hard things. Build your immunity to chaos before the storm hits. Guard your tongue and command your mind. Keep your composure when everyone around you is losing theirs. Demand proof from yourself. Don't tell people what you believe. Show them by how you carry yourself when everything falls apart. At 3 a.m. when you're exhausted, when your plans have collapsed, when your body hurts, when every excuse in the book is waiting for you to pick it up. Nobody cares what philosophy books are sitting on your nightstand. All that matters is who you are in that exact moment. Stop reading about hard choices. Start making them. Live the philosophy. Put in the work and let your actions be the only proof you ever need. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, be safe out there.